Tom Cooper says book sounds cool. Streaming games takes a lot of scheduling. Yeah. Yeah. I have a book out now. Uh, it's a book about Wizards and Warriors. It's called Wizards and Warriors and Me: My Life with Video Games. That was the first one that I wrote, and I kind of did it just to see if I could do it. It kind of started out as like I wanted to do like I got this idea to do like a zine, like an old like punk zine, but like I wanted to do it like about like video games and like metal music and horror movies and just all the shit I like. And so I wrote like the first article, and for whatever reason the first article that I wrote was about Wizards and Warriors and Doom and like my dad and video games and stuff. And once I wrote it, I was like, oh my god, like I could keep going about Wizards and Warriors, and I realized I had like all this shit I wanted to say about Wizards and Warriors. So then it ended up just turning into a whole book. And I was like, you know what, I just want to see if I can actually write a book, and I did it, and I wrote a book. So and I had a lot of fun doing it, and you know, I learned a lot doing it, and I kind of was like, you know what, I think I could do better. Their games are like the worst fucking games of all time, and like my book is sort of like a little bit of a different take on that, because like yes, there's a lot of like shitty LJN video games. I don't think they're as bad as they're made out to be. I think a lot of it has just become kind of a meme, you know, that like LJN makes shitty games, but like they weren't really like all bad. So, you know, and it's a lot too about like a big part of the book is about like nostalgia and sort of like, you know, like one man's like shitty game is like another man's like that was like my favorite game when I was a kid. You know what I mean? And it all just kind of boils down to like your perspective and like sort of like, you know, what you had when you were growing up and stuff. So like for me, like an example, like one of the books games I talk about a lot in the book is Karate Kid, because I had Karate Kid for NES when I was growing up, and it's an LJN game, and it's, you know, a lot of people consider it one of the shittiest games ever, but I actually really like Karate Kid for NES, and I don't think it's actually that bad of a game. And you know, it's sort of actually a testament to like less is more, because that game is actually only like 4 levels long. It's a really short game. But that's like what's kind of great about it, is you can kind of just like pop it in and like, you know, play for a couple hours and walk away, and like that's it. You don't have to like invest a bunch of time into it, which is like something that like modern games are missing. Like, you know, like most modern games expect you to invest like all this time into it, and you know, you'll see people talk about it too, like they'll judge a game based on like how long it is, and it's like, you know, for me it's like, you know, less is more sometimes. Tom Cooper said Maximum Carnage, though, still a classic, hard as hell. If that soundtrack has no right to be as good as it is on the SNES version. Yeah, that's something else that I talk about in the book that I actually just learned in research for the book, is that a lot of what people think are LJN games, and actually particularly what a lot of people think are shitty LJN games, aren't actually LJN games. They're just Acclaim games using the LJN label, but it's not actually LJN, because after 1990, LJN was sold to Acclaim in 1990. So like basically everything that came out after 1990, after a certain point in 1990, wasn't even an LJN game. It was all just Acclaim shit. So most of the games that people associate with like shitty LJN games were really just Acclaim.
From Acclaim, choose your weapon.
Acclaim Sports. Sweat the details.
A lot of their earlier games were actually really great. Like A Nightmare on Elm Street is an LJN game that like doesn't get talked about a lot, because I think people kind of maybe they get it confused in their mind with Friday the 13th, because Friday the 13th is considered like a shitty game, right? But Nightmare on Elm Street is actually a fucking fantastic game. it was actually made by Rare. It was one of their kind of earlier games, and it's really, really good, like really good. You know, Jaws is another game that they did that's like a licensed game, and it was like, again, it's like Karate Kid. It was like super short. It was a really, really short game, but it was fun as hell. Like the gameplay loop was like really great. And the reason they did it, here's the cool thing in the book that I learned that I think a lot of people are going to be shocked by, is that the whole reason that they bought LJN is because I guess Nintendo had a thing with publishers where they were like, you can only do 5 games a year on Nintendo. So what they did was they bought LJN out so then they could release 10 games a year, because they would do 5 games as Acclaim games and 5 games as LJN games, but it was really just Acclaim. So it was a way to like beat the system and make more money. Which is another reason why probably a lot of the games sucked, because they had that mentality, I think, of just like cranking out as many games as humanly possible. So and then they had like, cause you like a good example is a game like remember like Alien 3 was like a game that came out like on every fucking system.
The aliens are fast, spit acid, and are right behind you. It's Alien 3 for Genesis, Game Gear, NES, and Game Boy. Destroy deadly facehuggers before they get you.
Destroy every egg-laying, chest-bursting, acid-spitting alien on the planet, or this nightmare will never end. Alien 3 on Super NES from LJN.
But yeah, I talk a lot about, I think so far like the longest chapters are actually on Karate Kid and A Nightmare on Elm Street. And then I also talk about NFL football a lot, because like that NFL football game that LJN put out was actually, it wasn't as bad as people made it out to be, but the problem with that game was that it was kind of complicated to play, and like I think a lot of people rented it, and when you rented it you didn't get the all the paperwork that came with it. There was like a, you know, an instruction manual, and then like a playlist, like a fold-out playlist for defense and offense, and it showed you how to do all the plays and stuff. It was actually a pretty deep football game for the time. And but yeah, I think people rented it and didn't know how to play it, and they're like, "Oh, this sucks." But yeah, and it's weird. It's another one of those games that like the soundtrack was like better than it had any right to be. Tom said Nintendo was always strict with their third-party developer contractual stipulations. Yeah. Yep. And Acclaim found their way around it. Their LJN loophole. And you can tell the difference between, I mean, there's the year cutoff, but you'll know when it was Acclaim because they stopped doing the way that the cover art looked for LJN games. Because when they first were releasing games and it was like actually LJN, they had that like if you've ever seen an LJN game, like they were like black cases with like gold trim and it said like entertainment, video entertainment or something like that on them. And they stopped doing that when Acclaim took over, and they just sort of had like normal looking covers. Actually, I can hold on. I have one right here. This is the way that they used to look. You remember all the LJN games back in the day, they had this black and gold, black with the gold trim, and then they'd have the LJN up in the top. And then it says interactive video games in the top there. But anyway, yeah, that's like, they stopped doing that when Acclaim took over. So it's sort of like there's really only like 10 actual LJN games.